In the vast, empty void at the edge of known space, the Farsight, a research vessel of the Galactic Federation, floated silently among the distant stars. The Galactic Federation, spanning dozens of star systems, was always in need of new resources to fuel its rapid expansion and technological growth. The Farsight was just one of many ships sent into uncharted territories to find the elements that could power new colonies, fuel engines, and feed the insatiable hunger of a growing galaxy. Its mission was routine scan, sample report. For the crew, the long, cold stretches of space were familiar. But today, something different lurked in the void. "We've picked up a strange reading," said Yara Keth, the lead scientist. His pale, iridescent skin shimmered under the dim lights of the control room as he tapped furiously on his console. His species, the Ulith, were known for their careful and methodical nature, a trait highly prized in the Federation's scientific ranks. But there was an edge to his voice now, an uncharacteristic uncertainty. "What kind of strange reading?" came a voice from the back of the room. Dr. Rebecca Taylor, a human, had joined the mission as an observer, a representative of Earth. Humanity had only recently earned its place among the galactic civilizations, still viewed as newcomers to the interstellar stage. Tall, with short-cropped brown hair and sharp, curious eyes, Rebecca always seemed slightly out of place among the more seasoned members of the Federation. Still, she had a knack for surviving in chaotic situations. "It's difficult to describe." Yara Keth hesitated, turning to her. "It's not like any mineral or element we've cataloged. Its properties keep shifting, unstable, inconsistent." Rebecca stepped forward, intrigued. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the data display. Yara Keth nodded, stepping aside as she leaned in to study the screen. The object wasn't large, but the sensors couldn't lock onto it properly. It seemed to absorb energy from their instruments, bending light and distorting the space around it. "This shouldn't exist," Rebecca muttered, narrowing her eyes. "It's absorbing energy, some kind of anomaly, maybe a material we've never encountered, or something we shouldn't be messing with," Yara Keth replied, his voice unusually grim. By protocol, Captain Zorak was called in. A towering Clithian, Zorak species were known for their militaristic culture, rising to prominence after crushing a rebellion in the Outer Rim. His deep blue skin and angular features, along with his intense gaze, made him an imposing presence. He stood with his arms crossed, surveying the strange reading on the monitor. This could be valuable, Zorak mused, though his eyes betrayed a hint of caution. Or it could be dangerous. The Federation had long sought resources that could fuel their technological advancements, particularly in energy manipulation. Entire planets were often mined dry in search of materials to power their ever-advancing technologies. But this was something different, something alive in a way that none of them could understand. Rebecca could feel the weight of it settling in her gut. "I recommend we approach with extreme caution," Rebecca said, breaking the silence. "There's too much we don't understand." Zorak's gaze shifted to Yara Keth, who nodded in agreement. This could be volatile, or worse, something with unknown consequences. But caution wasn't the Federation's strong suit. When the promise of discovery loomed large, especially a discovery of this magnitude, orders were given without hesitation. A retrieval team was dispatched to collect the object. It was small, about the size of a human fist, and appeared to be made of a strange, glass-like substance that shimmered with shifting colors. Mesmerizing in its beauty, but Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Her instincts, honed through years of working in dangerous, unpredictable environments, screamed at her to stay back, to keep it contained. In the laboratory, Yara Keth and his team began their analysis. Initial scans showed no known composition, no familiar elements, no recognizable structure. The substance seemed to shift constantly, as if it were alive, feeding off the energy in the lab's instruments. The more energy they applied, the more it grew. Hours passed as test after test failed to yield answers. Rebecca watched from the observation room, her mind racing. She had encountered strange things in her career, but nothing like this. It was as if the substance defied the fundamental laws of physics, shifting between states that shouldn't be able to coexist. What do you think it is? Yaraketh asked, joining her in the observation room. I don't know, Rebecca replied, her frown deepening. But I don't like it. Before Yaraketh could respond, alarms blared through the ship. Red lights flashed, and a voice echoed over the intercom containment breach in Lab 4. Yaraketh's face paled. That's where the substance is. They rushed to the lab only to find chaos. The containment unit, designed to withstand the most volatile of materials, was cracked, and a faint glow emanated from the breach. Tendrils of light snaked across the floor, expanding as they consumed the energy in the room. Seal it off. Zorak's voice boomed over the comm system, his tone edged with panic. The crew scrambled to contain the breach, but the substance moved faster than they expected, feeding, growing. It wasn't just spreading, it was absorbing the ship's power, feeding off every system it could touch. Rebecca's heart raced. We need to eject it now. Eject it? We don't even know what it is yet. Yaraketh protested, his scientific curiosity battling with his sense of self-preservation. If we don't, we won't have a ship left to study it with. Rebecca shot back, her voice sharp with urgency. Zorak, monitoring the situation from the bridge, gave the order. Eject the lab into space. Now. The team scrambled to execute the command, and moments later Lab 4 was jettisoned into the cold void of space. The ship's sensors showed the substance continuing to grow, even in the vacuum. It twisted and writhed like a living thing. A thing that didn't need air or warmth to survive, only energy. Back on the ship, the crew breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the tension lingered. Rebecca stood at the viewport, watching the glowing mass drift away into the blackness. We need to warn the Federation, she said quietly. This thing, it's unlike anything we've ever seen, and it's not done. Yaraketh nodded slowly, his usually calm demeanor rattled. I agree, but I fear this is only the beginning. Rebecca turned to him, her voice low. Then we better be ready for whatever comes next. The Farsight floated in silence again, but the mood on board had shifted. Jettisoning Lab 4 had bought them time, but no one was under any illusions that the threat was truly gone. Outside the ship, the substance continued to grow, twisting, expanding, as if it were searching for something to feed on. In the command center, Zorak's face remained stoic, but Rebecca could see the tension in his movements. His mind was undoubtedly racing, calculating the risks of their next move. We have to get back to Federation space, Zorak announced. This is beyond our capability. If it spreads further, we'll need reinforcements. Rebecca, standing at the edge of the room, shook her head. It won't wait for us. You saw what it did in the lab. Whatever that thing is, it feeds on energy, and it's growing faster than we can escape. The room fell silent as the crew absorbed her words. They turned to her, seeking answers she didn't have. Humans were known for their ability to improvise, to think on their feet, but even Rebecca wasn't sure how to handle this. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently. The lights flickered, and the screens displaying the substance's movements glitched. Energy readings spiked on the monitors. It's still affecting us, Yaraketh muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. Even from out there. Rebecca turned to him. It's still pulling energy from the ship. Somehow it's connected. Yaraketh's face paled further. That's impossible. There's no physical contact. Rebecca shook her head. It doesn't need physical contact. It's feeding on energy fields. We're still giving it what it needs. The ship lurched again, sending crew members stumbling. The lights dimmed and the engines hummed at half power. Engine power is down by 30%, an engineer reported, barely concealing his panic. Rebecca steadied herself. It's draining us faster than we thought. Zorak's calm facade finally cracked. Suggestions, Doctor. Rebecca met his gaze. We need to cut the power. Every second the ship runs, we're feeding it. Cut power to the whole ship? Yaraketh asked, incredulous. That'll leave us defenseless, no shields, no life support. I know, Rebecca replied, but if we don't, it'll drain us dry. Zorak looked around at his crew, the weight of the decision clear on his face. Then, with a grim nod, he gave the order. Do it. The ship fell into darkness. The engines silenced, the lights dimmed to emergency levels, and for the first time, the far site was quiet. Rebecca held her breath, staring at the monitors. The energy readings flatlined. For a moment, it seemed like the plan had worked. But then, new signals appeared, weak but unmistakable. "It's still drawing power," Rebecca whispered, her voice hollow. Yara Keth's eyes widened in disbelief. "But how? We've shut everything down." Rebecca's mind raced. The substance wasn't just feeding on their systems, it was feeding on them. The crew, their very presence, was keeping it alive. "We need to isolate the remaining energy sources," she said. "Life support, any backup systems we've missed. It's reacting to us, it's feeding off everything we have." The engineers scrambled to cut off the last remnants of power, but the readings showed that the substance was still growing. Outside, its tendrils stretched further, now moving purposefully toward the ship. "It's not just expanding randomly," Yara Keth said, his voice trembling. "It's coming for us." Panic spread through the crew. Some argued to abandon ship, to flee in escape pods, but Rebecca knew it wouldn't help. If the substance could reach them here, in deep space, there was nowhere to run. "No one's leaving this ship," Zorak barked, regaining control. "We stand and fight." Rebecca admired his resolve, but she knew brute force wouldn't save them. This wasn't a threat they could overpower, it was something they had to outsmart. "We need to get creative," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Then, louder, "We're not going to win this by running or fighting. We need to outthink it." Zorak turned to her, intrigued but skeptical. "You have a plan?" "I have an idea," Rebecca replied, the gears in her mind turning. "But it's risky." "Risk is all we have left," human Zorak said. "What do you suggest?" "We turn the ship's systems back on, but not to fight it," Rebecca explained. "We give it what it wants, power. We lure it in." The crew stared at her in stunned silence. Yara Keth was the first to speak. "You want to feed it more?" "Not exactly," Rebecca replied. "We control what it takes, how much. If we can isolate a power source, we might be able to trap it." "It's insane," one of the engineers muttered. "Insane, but it might work," Zorak said, nodding. "Do it." The crew worked quickly, setting up an isolated energy grid within the ship. As they moved, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They were dealing with something far beyond their understanding. The substance responded almost immediately. Tendrils of light snaked toward the ship, drawn to the energy source they had created. Rebecca's heart pounded as the substance neared. It moved with intent, feeding on the power they provided. "Activate the containment field," Zorak ordered. A shimmering force field appeared, surrounding the power grid. For a moment it seemed to hold. The substance recoiled, tendrils bouncing off the field as if confused. But then it adapted. The tendrils grew thicker, more aggressive, pressing harder against the field. The containment grid flickered. "It's breaking through," one of the engineers shouted. Rebecca's mind raced. The containment field wasn't enough. If they didn't stop it now, it would consume the entire ship. "There's only one way to stop it," Rebecca said, her voice firm. Zorak turned to her. "What are you suggesting?" "I need to get closer," Rebecca replied. "It's reacting to energy. It's like it's alive, learning. I need to control the flow directly. We need to outsmart it." Yara Keth stared at her in disbelief. "That's insane. You'd be exposing yourself to it." "I know," Rebecca said. "But it's the only chance we have." Zorak hesitated, then nodded. "Do it." Rebecca grabbed a portable energy regulator and approached the containment field. The crew watched her in silence, their fear palpable. The substance pulsed on the other side of the field, as if sensing her. Rebecca took a deep breath and activated the regulator. The field flickered and the substance surged toward her. Tendrils of light wrapped around her arm, pulling her closer. She gritted her teeth, controlling the energy flow, guiding the substance away from the ship's systems and into the containment grid. It was working. Slowly, the substance began to retreat, coiling around the energy grid. Rebecca fed it just enough power to keep it focused, drawing it away from the ship. "Containment field is stabilizing." Yara Keth called out. Rebecca's arm burned where the tendrils had touched her, but she ignored the pain. She focused on controlling the substance, keeping it contained. But just as victory seemed within reach, the substance surged one last time. For a brief moment, Rebecca felt its presence in her mind, as if it were trying to communicate. Then, silence. The force field snapped into place, sealing the substance inside. The ship's systems hummed back to life. Rebecca collapsed to the floor, trembling with exhaustion. The substance was contained, but she knew this was far from over. Zorak approached, his face as stoic as ever, but there was a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "You did it," he said quietly. Rebecca nodded, too tired to respond. She had won this round, but the substance had learned, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't finished with them yet.